Hey everyone, this is the BU Now Weekly Politicast. I'm CJ DeLeo.
I'm Micah Richards.
And we're here to talk to you about the Mueller report, as of what we know so far. So just to start us off right off the bat, the Mueller report was announced that it was completed this past Friday. So we still don't have the full report. We have details provided by William Barr, who's the current Attorney General. And really, we don't have too much to go off of beyond the fact that it essentially found Trump innocent of collusion and obstruction of justice.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction is to make sure that he is innocent of collusion, but
Right.
It does specifically state, even in Barr's summary, that he has not been exonerated of any crimes. And I think that's important for people to realize before they start saying, oh, the Republicans won or whatever. Well, this is far from over.
So, I mean, if you are a Republican, if you are a diehard Trump supporter, this is good news for you. Like, it is evidence that, at least as of right now, there's no evidence to suggest that he actually colluded with the Russian government, that he did anything incredibly illegal.
Right.
That being said, just because there's no evidence of it doesn't mean it didn't happen. So, of course, anyone on the left, anyone who's following the story is going to be watching this pretty closely.
Yeah. I think it's also important to say that all the people who are, celebrating that, believing that Russia did not interfere in our elections is completely wrong. Even in Barr's summary, he talks about how the Russians absolutely meddled in our election. Now, whether or not they were involved in Trump's campaign,
right.
The Mueller report has concluded that they did not. However, they still very much interfered with American elections. And it's not, This isn't a victory lap at this point. We need to be asking the questions about, who did interfere and can they do it again?
Right. And I mean, it is evident that Russians did not collude. They did interfere in the election.
Mm-hmm.
It's most prominent, through the creation of fake social media accounts,
right.
Facebook especially. We know that they created fake Facebook accounts for the purposes of spreading propaganda that was typically pro-Trump.
Absolutely.
This is observable. We have Russian testimony. We have people who worked for these troll farms that actually confess to doing this.
Right.
And for them, it's not even illegal. It's just them trying to screw things up for us.
In some cases, it may even be government-sanctioned activity. I mean,
right.
And there is clear evidence of this happening because Russia has a lot to gain from creating a left versus right divide to distract us, that the divide is truly between the wealthy and the less wealthy. And the longer that Russia is able to create this instability by posting troll messages about lock her up, well, then they distract us from the real issue and they keep us focused on this identity politics that people seem to just love.
Yeah, I mean, it tells you a little bit about how easily distracted we are, how much we're willing to believe what we hear, what we see online. Moving past the Russia investigation, moving past what we know so far, I really think if Trump gets impeached, and I don't think he's going to get impeached, but we'll talk about that in a bit. I really think if he got into trouble for some sort of impeachable crime, it wouldn't be anything having to do with Russia. It wouldn't be anything having to do with collusion or obstruction of justice. And I think, if nothing else, that's what the Mueller report sort of brought to everyone's attention.
I agree, and I think the fact that there's people celebrating that our president is not a Russian spy might be setting the bar a little bit low, because as you say, I mean, there's still a very real possibility that he's charged with other crimes, and there's still that small possibility that he'll be impeached for other various reasons. So.
Right. So I guess we could talk about impeachment now, since there's really not too much to cover on the Mueller report. Well, I do want to say on the Mueller report, William Barr actually did announce earlier today that the full Mueller report will be released to the public within the next few weeks. So if you do have any desire to read that, I don't know why you would. It's going to be around. Again, Robert Mueller probably would have come forward by now if what Barr was inaccurately displaying or demonstrating, or really just saying what was on here.
Right.
So I really don't think there's any value that the average citizen would get out of reading this. That being said, we have the Freedom of Information Act. We have the right to see these government documents. So
yeah, but I think it's also important to point out that Barr will be sending the report to the White House for them to redact whatever they want before it's actually released to the public. Now, do I think that they will engage in extreme disinformation? Probably not, because of the severity of something like this, but they can still remove information that the public may view as pertinent, but they do not. So.
Right. I mean, well, that's the thing. I feel like, if Trump were smart, if he knew what he was doing here, he would probably not redact any information. He would make sure that the report was released in its entirety. Right. If it really does show his innocence, he shouldn't have anything that he's willing to hide. Exactly.
And I believe he has come out and said that he wants it to be released to the public as well, right. But he said the same thing about his tax returns and numerous other things, which obviously never came through. And I think it's interesting that Trump now, I think it was just today, maybe yesterday, has come out and called Mueller's investigation honorable after years of trashing it and trashing not only the investigation itself, but Robert Mueller. And he did the same thing with the Electoral College. He would decry the Electoral College, saying that it was rigged, that American politics were rigged, until it helped him win. And, now he holds the complete opposite position. He loves the Electoral College, and he'll argue with any Democrat who says that we should get rid of it. So he's done a complete flip-flop because it works in his favor, and he's doing the same thing with Mueller.
I will say on the Electoral College, I'm shocked that hasn't become more of a hot-button issue. I know Elizabeth Warren brought it up recently that it should be abolished, and I think most Americans are probably in agreement with that.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, the Democrats have now lost 2 elections in the past 20 years because of the Electoral College.
And I believe the Democrats are the only ones that ever lost to the Electoral College.
I'd have to fact check you on that. I don't know offhand, but it wouldn't shock me if that were the case. I have to figure out how far back, because it's only happened 5 times in history that someone has won the Electoral College vote, but not the popular vote.
Okay.
I'm not sure how far back that goes. I don't think it was too ancient history, but it's, I think, becoming more common. Like, we're probably going to see more elections like that because of shifting demographics.
I agree.
Yeah, so it is becoming more of an issue, and it does highlight the fact that Trump is the kind of guy who is against or for anything until it benefits him.
Right.
Until it he's very much that kind of Republican. He's very much the kind of Republican that will change his mind on the flip of a dime. It's all about his own identity. And that's what makes me think that there's probably more to the Mueller report. The fact that he was against it for as long as he did, despite the fact that it did find him innocent, he must have realized on some level that there is something about him. There must be some collusion on some level that the Mueller report just didn't dig up, that is so far hidden that he thought could come out.
That's actually a really good point, and I think we're kind of brushing over the fact that if Jeff Sessions were still in office as Attorney General, then this whole thing may have played out differently. Sessions recused himself from the investigation, which William Barr did not. Barr was publicly adamant against the Mueller investigation, and he was appointed, and when he was appointed, people accused him of holding the position essentially as Trump's pawn so that he could do whatever Trump says in the long run. Now, you've brought up that Mueller probably would come and speak out. He would not be doing this radio silence that he's been doing since Friday if anything out of the ordinary were to arise. But at the same time, there's a clear history of Barr covering things up for the GOP, for the Bush administration, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's small things at play now as well.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning that pretty much anyone who's handled the investigation to this point from the governmental perspective has been on the side of Trump. Aside from Mueller himself, you'd have to imagine that there will be some bias at play here. That being said, I think Robert Mueller has proven that he's sort of a man of integrity. He genuinely will be honest, even if it's with something he disagrees with. Despite the fact that the guy is like a lifelong Republican, I feel like he values the safety and health of our country above anything else.
I agree.
I'd have to imagine that if there were any sort of dishonest reporting on the behalf of Barr, that Mueller would come forward. He would say something. And if he didn't, it's going to be released in a few weeks. We're going to know for sure.
Yeah. So what do you say to the people who call the Mueller investigation a waste of time, a witch hunt, a waste of money?
So first of all, I don't think it's a waste of money. I think if there's a credible threat to our democracy, and I think Trump has proven that, he's not the most trustworthy guy, even if you do agree with him, even if you are a supporter, you have to admit he does change his opinion on things pretty consistently. So I think if there is any sort of credible threat to our democracy, it's worth investigating. That being said, this didn't turn up the best results. It didn't turn up the results that I think a lot of Democrats were hoping for, but it's still worth investigating. It's still worth seeing the end game of.
I agree. Last I checked, the Mueller investigation cost around $30 million. I believe it brought in around $46 million in assets. So the money argument really doesn't hold any water. Now, if you want to say that government resources were eaten up on this investigation that ended up leading to nothing, that's a fair argument. But just because the investigation did not turn up the results that we expected or hoped for doesn't mean that it wasn't a worthwhile investigation, in my opinion.
I mean, you have to wonder if things had gone differently, if Hillary had ended up winning 2016, the actual electoral vote, and she had gotten into a position where she was under a similar investigation. Would Republicans be in favor of that, despite it being a waste of taxpayer money in any other instance?
They would absolutely be in favor of a much longer investigation, and I think they would be doing exactly what a lot of Democrats are doing right now, which is insisting that Barr's summary is not enough and that there's still a lot of truth hidden behind the curtain.
Right, and I'd love to have a Republican on here at some point to actually defend that side. It seems like more often than not, fiscal conservatism is only their philosophy when it directly benefits them.
Right.
So, I feel like it's not, it is purely a political argument at this point. Regardless of political affiliation, if the president is criminally involved or, if the president is in this sort of untrustworthy capacity where he could have colluded with a hostile foreign government, we should take that as a serious threat. Okay, I guess we can move over to impeachment now, since we've sort of beaten the Mueller report to death. So weirdly enough, Nancy Pelosi was talking about the issue of impeachment days before the Mueller report came out. And we knew the Mueller report was coming for the longest time. We knew that he was pretty much done with it for the past few weeks. Nancy Pelosi essentially said, excuse me. Nancy Pelosi essentially said that impeachment should only be the course of action if, beyond a shadow of a doubt, he's guilty, if Republicans are willing to accept that he's guilty. And I think that's an interesting, I don't agree with Pelosi on a lot. I think that's worth mentioning. I think most Democrats are sort of starting to see her as being extremely neoliberal. That being said, she's absolutely right on this point. We've talked about impeachment in the past. We've talked about exactly what impeachment would do for Trump. First of all, impeachment has never actually succeeded in taking a president out of office. I think that's worth mentioning. It's only two presidents in U.S. history, Bill Clinton and Andrew Johnson, have actually been impeached, neither removed from office. Bill Clinton actually served another term after being impeached.
Right. So what does impeachment mean if not removed from office?
So it's essentially the first step in removing someone from office. It's essentially saying there was wrongdoing during this person's time in office or time before office, and he has committed an impeachable offense. He's very, very much in the process of being removed from office. And for Bill Clinton, it was perjury. He basically lied during a federal investigation, which seems like small potatoes in comparison to some of the stuff Trump's done. So it's worth mentioning that a lot of the American public was against the impeachment of President Clinton, and the Republicans did proceed just by having that majority in the House at the time.
Sure.
Because of this, Clinton won re-election overwhelmingly. He overwhelmingly gained the support of the public after his impeachment and easily won his 1996 re-election. I feel like if Trump were impeached, he would probably have a similar phenomenon. His base would double down, and we would see a lot more Trump supporters or support for the president. Even moderates, if they saw the president as being taken out of office or impeached for anything less than absolute guilt, it would not work in the favor of the Democratic Party. So that being said, the only time where we should actually impeach and remove someone from office is when we can prove without a shadow of doubt, even to their base, that what they have been doing is guilt. What they have been doing is an obstruction of justice. again, I feel like even if we did impeach him, remove him from office, President Pence wouldn't be much better.
Right. And that's part of why I think the impeachment discussion is a distraction because, obviously at first, Trump's election was a milestone in American history. It shook a lot of Americans to their core. And if we were having the impeachment discussion on day one still, then okay, let's proceed. But we're at the point now where we need to get down to brass tacks and we need to focus on 2020. And to think that we want to waste the next year or so trying to impeach a man when we know that process is going to take a lot longer and we know that man can do a lot of damage in that time, I think it's just a waste of time. And I don't understand the Democrats who are running on the platform that they'll bring charges against Trump and his administration if elected. I don't think that this is worth spending any more time on than we've already devoted to. I think once Trump is out of office, we undo as much as we can of the damage that he did, and we move on. But we don't focus on punishing him or bringing action against him. I think we should just ignore him. I think that would hurt him more than anything.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. So I think there are a handful of presidential candidates, and I say a handful because it's hard to keep track of exactly how many there are, exactly what their positions are. I'm sure Kristen Gillibrand's one of the more prominent ones. I'm sure what's her name, Amy Klobuchar, probably also in that camp of running on just putting criminal charges against Trump.
Harris as well, yeah.
Harris, yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. So I mean that doesn't shock me. That at this point, the Democratic base, they know their base well enough to know that it's so easy to disparage Trump. It's so easy to say things against him because their base eats that up. Their base knows that, they know that their base does not want Trump in office. So, of course, they're going to say as many nasty things about them as they can. But
even Trump runs on, he did run on fear, absolutely. But even Trump ran on policies. He would talk about building the wall, things like that, and
it's a terrible policy.
It is a terrible policy,
completely impractical, but it's a policy.
It's a policy, and I want to bring Donald Trump to court and make sure he's tried in criminal court for his actions. That's not a policy. That's essentially lock her up all over again, and it's just with a leftist twist.
Right.
And I don't see the appeal, and I want to move on from Trump as quickly as we can, and I think that anything involving impeachment or criminal charges will just drag this on for years and years, which I'm sure the media will love, but it's just not what we need.
Right. I mean, it's gotten to a point where it is pretty vapid, where, we're seeing more and more that these presidential candidates that are running into 2020, part of the reason that there are so many is because they think it's a sure thing, which 2016 proved that people can win against Trump even when the poll numbers are in their favor, so you should never treat it as a sure thing. These candidates really do need to run on more than just F Trump, there needs to be more policy-driven moves in this campaign.
And I think you bring up a great point in that there's so many Democratic candidates running, and a lot of them really just give off this air to me of, I'm the chosen one, I'm the one to beat Trump. And I know Beto has a quote floating out there, something like
it's like I deserve that.
Exactly. I was born to do this.
I feel it. I was born to do it.
Yeah, and I think that really sums up Booker and Harris and a few others. I don't want to pick on every Democratic candidate because I may have to vote for him one day, but
right.
I think a lot of them seem to be running on this platform of pride and this sense of moral superiority and absolutely entitlement.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. They're everything that the older generations accuse millennials of being. They think they're entitled to become the most powerful person on the face of the earth.
Right. And I think that in their eyes, they see themselves as the hero against the villain Trump. And I'll admit that Trump is a very easy figure to paint as a villain, but so far I'm not seeing a lot of heroes in the Democratic camp, so we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, again, I feel like most of these candidates running again on this anti-Trump platform, and I call it an anti-Trump platform because, again, they don't really have anything other than anti-Trump rhetoric. They don't have any sort of opinions of their own, apparently. I don't think many of them have any sort of chance at the presidency. Harris maybe, but Booker, he's still polling at 1%.
Right.
Gillibrand also polling at 1%. Realistically, the guys with the best chance is Bernie, definitely. He's currently the front runner as of the time we're recording this. And, you know, this is a guy who obviously does not like Trump, does not agree with his policies. But, again, first campaign video Bernie released, completely policy-driven. Mm-hmm. The guy stands for stuff.
Yeah, he refuses to get down in the mud with Trump, which I don't think any other Democratic candidate would stand their ground as much. I think that all of them will play hardball if need be. Beto is there's already sound bites coming up of him using Lion Ted and things like that, and a lot of these people are very willing to engage in Trump's immaturity, and I think that's what set Bernie apart, is that he's not willing to do that. He's, like you said, very policy driven, and I think that's going to drive Trump crazy, is that he can't get inside his head the same way that he can with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's why I think it's going to be such an interesting general election matchup, assuming Bernie gets the nomination. I think it's worth examining. I think for any Democratic candidates who are interested in the presidency, who are interested in running, who are currently running, that's what it comes down to. Like, listen to us, listen to our generation. We do not care about the Trump, put downs, junk, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
We need a policy-driven candidate. That's what it comes down to. We need a candidate who leads by example. We need a candidate who is actually willing to stand for something other than F Trump.
Yeah, I agree. Now, whether we deserve it or not, I'm not really sure. The way that we've attacked each other viciously the past 4 years. It goes back further than that, but ever since Trump announced his candidacy, there's evidence that hate crimes are up in the areas where he holds his rallies and things like that. I mean, there's clear evidence that the things that Trump says riles his base in a violent manner, and the left has fought back, and we're at a point now where we shame Republicans and Democrats for voting on bills of the opposite party. We try and dig up things in their past to paint them as centrists and things like that. I mean, we are at a point where one side or both sides really, really hate the other, and I don't see us as very willing to agree on someone who has good policies, because we're too caught up in the left versus right argument.
Right. I mean, that's the unfortunate thing about the current state of American politics. It is a state of perpetual polarization. It's, increasingly gotten worse. Really, I mean, I guess you could argue that it's been going on since the 70s. I think it got really bad during the Clinton administration. Again, impeachment really did drive a wedge between the two parties. People saw that as being unfair. I don't know if there's any easy solution to fix the division between the Republicans and Democrats in this country. I think, if anything, we need more candidates, like Bernie Sanders, candidates who do not really give a damn about partisan politics. And again, he's run as an independent most of his life, so I think that's a fair claim to make.
Yeah, I think that definitely helps.
We need a candidate who actually cares about the American people, who won't just say what people want to hear, who will actually be upfront and honest with the people, who will actually do things that benefit the American people, who prove that, it doesn't matter what side you're on, as long as you're willing to serve the public. That's what makes a good politician.
I agree.
So, I don't have anything else to add if you wanted to end it early.
I think that's about all I got.
Okay. Well, from both of us here, this has been the BU Now Weekly Politicast. Thanks for listening.